Hello, friends. Welcome to another week of summer reading. We've got a familiar face, one of our friends back with us this week, and she is now park interpreter Alyssa with the South Carolina Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. And she's here today to talk a little bit about birds and their habitats with us. Hopefully, you'll come out for our Birdie Friends activity today to pick that up. You can either make your birdhouses there or you can take them home with you. I'll let our park interpreter take over.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you guys again, even though it's virtually still, and I don't know your faces, but it's fun to do these. So this time I'll be talking about the birds at Red Cliff Plantation and also a little bit about Red Cliff Plantation itself. Right now, Red Cliff Plantation was the main mansion. The big house here was finished in 1859, and the enslaved quarters were finished in 1857, so a little bit late during slavery. So it is a little bit of a different plantation from what you might be used to if you visit Charleston. We still have those standing structures as well. And so definitely come visit if you have the chance. And it's changed a lot over the years. When the first owner, James Henry Hammond, was living here, he pretty much cut down all of the trees. So most of them that you'll see here and the nesting habitats that I'll talk about weren't here during James Henry Hammond's time. The birds had a very limited space, mostly on the outskirts of the property. And that was about 400 acres that he'd pretty much clear cut. And now we have tons of trees, and it's just a wide variety. We have Chinese parasols, we have live oaks, we have a large cherry bark oak tree, all sorts of trees that the birds can nest in. And we also have a lot of pecan trees, and you'll see those heading towards the Magnolia Alley, which hold a lot of those cavity nesters, because we have a lot of snags, which are trees that are dead but still standing. And that's a really great habitat for different animals, not just birds. They'll nest in the holes in the trees. We also have tons of, you'll see around that area as well, tons of holes from woodpeckers, because we have a lot of woodpeckers on the property. And those are also cavity nesters. And I'll be talking a lot about cavity nesters because we have a fair few of those cavity nesting species on the park. So definitely come out and take a look and do some bird watching if you have the chance. It's in Beach Island, South Carolina, which is in Aiken County. Okay. And you might think you've driven into Georgia, because sometimes, depending on where you're coming from, you do have to drive into Georgia and back into South Carolina.
Oh, that's interesting.
But don't worry, you're still in So I do want to share some pictures with you of the kind of birds we have. And it's really cool because we just found out we have some chimney swifts living in one of the enslaved cabins. And I'll show you a picture of what chimney swifts look like. So these are what shaped body. Compared to birds you usually see, they're very aerodynamic. And instead of like perching on sticks and stuff, they will just kind of like hang on to the wall.
Oh, okay.
And that's kind of also how they build their nests. They just attach them to the wall in a little cup form. And that's what we have in one of them. Yeah, we found the eggs, and the eggs are very, very small. I'd say the ones we found have only been about that big. Mm-hmm. They're very tiny. They're pretty tiny birds. You can see it in this picture. That's an adult. It fits in the palms of someone's hands.
Oh, wow.
But they're very noisy, and I'm pretty sure they've frightened a few of our visitors.
Oh.
But But this is kind of how they nest, which is different from the cavity nesters I was mentioning earlier. And they build their out of they're really cute. They build their nests out of sticks. So they have a very hard kind of sticky nest. It's like their spit and sticks.
Okay.
And then another about is one that people are really familiar with. Get my screen to catch up with this one. I'm seeing hummingbirds. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So we're pretty familiar with. I know chimney swifts are pretty rare to see. But these are some hummingbird nests, and they're very small because hummingbirds are teeny tiny, and their eggs are also pretty tiny. And they build very flexible nests. And they also sometimes, ones in South Carolina, decorate their nests. The hummingbirds. And so hummingbirds sometimes they decorate their nest with lichen. So you'll see on this screen, you'll see these little green pieces, and that's pieces of lichen. Probably to help the nest blend in. Hummingbirds use a softer material. They use just bits of fabric that they might find, just the chimney swifts that use hard twigs. Because again, I mentioned their nests are a little bit more flexible. So they have their little tiny eggs. You can see here, which then the nest will allow those tiny eggs to grow into tiny birds, into slightly much larger birds. And they still pretty much fit in that little nest that they have. It has to stretch just a little bit. And see, the next type of bird I want to talk about are cavity nesters, and that covers a wide woodpeckers, like I mentioned earlier, wood ducks, and other type of ducks, if you'll see here. Also are cavity nesters. And cavity nesters are birds that find like holes in trees, or say like a tree house or a birdhouse. And they're the ones that live in these tiny birdhouses like this. They need like a small hole and then a large open cavity. And so they put in their whatever nesting materials they have, usually like pine straw or something here in the Southeast. Here over near Red Cliff, we have some wheat growing. So sometimes you'll find a little bit of wheat in there. And so youngsters are birds that live in cavities. A lot of them live in trees, and they just have a small hole like this illustration. And behind that small hole is a deep cavity, or at least deep enough for them to have their nest in and let their young grow. So depending on how big they are, that cavity inside will be much larger. If they're a much larger bird, if they're a smaller bird, then the cavity is pretty small. So cavity nesters cover a wide variety of birds. So you'll see birds like wood ducks and other ducks. So those have a slightly larger cavity and a slightly larger hole that they live in. And then you'll see things like these tiny birds, and we'll see chickadees. If you're not familiar with chickadees, they're very tiny little birds. They're very tiny birds, and they have a little flat cap on their head, like this bird here is a chickadee. And they live in cavity nest too. So they're much smaller than a wood duck. Mourning doves, woodpeckers, and bluebirds are also cavity nesters. And at Red Cliff, we have bluebird boxes. And currently we have some chickadees in there. Well, the chickadees have already flown the nest. And now we have some bluebirds nesting in there. Some of their eggs have hatched. And so we have some baby bluebirds. And some of them are getting ready to leave the nest. Oh. So this covers a wide variety of birds. You'll see here some more types of cavity nesting birds, but they all have the pretty much same shape of the cavity. And you'll see just a small hole, and not to mistake it with an actual hole from a woodpecker just looking for food. It'll be, sometimes it is a natural hole that just happened and the birds fly in there and they put in their nest. Or you'll see like here, it was created. And then inside, this is kind of what the bluebird boxes look inside for us. Sometimes so you'll see some pine straw, a little bit of dirt, just some other kind of soft
but mildly firm nesting material. So not like the hummingbirds, but also somewhere in between the hummingbirds and the chimney swifts. So there's more structure. Yeah, you'll see several little birds inside, and they're just kind of stacked in to the cavity. And here's what the outside of some of those cavity nesting boxes look like. So you've probably seen some of these.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's some of the main types of nests that birds have. There are plenty of others. There are some bird nests that are meant to last much longer, like bald eagle nests, and they're very large because, of course, bald eagles are very large birds, and so some of their nests will weigh hundreds of pounds. Well, what was it? I looked it up. Some of their nests are very heavy, and then there are also burrow nests. I don't know if we have any here, but you'll see a lot of like burrowing owls and things like that. They will burrow into the ground and have their nest there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some platform nesters, which we have a few of those here. And they just put their nests on a platform, say, yeah. And those are kind of terrifying looking if you see them from below, but they're really like on a, just like a platform, really, just wherever you have some sort of platform high up in the air, they'll put their nest there. So osprey, bald eagles, egrets, and storks. And we have egrets here. We have some cattle egrets, and they're just tiny little white egrets that don't really hang around water here. And then you'll have some ground nesting birds that really just nest on the ground. They'll build like a regular rounded nest, but it'll just be straight on the ground instead of in the tree like we're used to. And that's all I really have to share about bird nesting. There's tons of bird nests, tons of birds, and they don't all nest the same way, and not all of their nests are made of the same materials, especially changes like depending on where you're living. So if you live in the southeast or the northeast or out in the west coast, the materials that they have available changes what they make their nest out of, even if they're a very similar shape.
Cool. Always learn so much about things when we chat with you. Things I don't even think about. I wouldn't think about, all the different types of birds that could be on a plantation in South Carolina and the different type of living habitats that they would make based on their characteristics as birds. So it's also always a pleasure. So thank you so much for hanging out with us again today. And remember, guys, to come by and get your kits. Y'all have a good one.
Bye. Thanks for having me again.